Hey, everyone, and welcome to this deep dive into a communication quirk we all deal with.
Oh, yeah,
Signal amplification bias.
definitely.
You know, when you're totally sure your message is crystal clear,
Uh-huh.
but for some reason it gets totally misinterpreted.
Yeah, like you're speaking a different language.
Exactly.
It's so frustrating.
It really is.
You're like, didn't I just say that?
Right. And for this deep dive, our main source is going to be communicate,
Yeah.
don't assume.
Great book, by the way.
Yeah, have you read it?
Oh, yeah, cover to cover.
We're going to explore signal amplification bias.
Okay.
See how it can mess things up in relationships,
Uh-huh.
and then talk about ways to avoid those communication pitfalls.
Sounds good.
So think about this. Have you ever tried to hint that you needed a little alone time,
Oh, yeah.
only to have your partner plan a surprise party or something?
In there.
Classic case of signal amplification bias.
Exactly.
So let's break it down. What is signal amplification bias, and why does it seem to happen so much in relationships?
So signal amplification bias is basically this disconnect
Okay.
between what's happening inside our heads and
Mhm.
how we actually express it.
Oh, I see.
We're so focused on our own thoughts and feelings that we just assume everyone else knows what they are.
Like, they're obvious.
Yeah, but that's usually not true at all.
It's like sending smoke signals
Haha,
and expecting everyone to understand Morse code.
perfect analogy.
But communicate, don't assume, points out
Yeah.
that this overestimation of how transparent we are
Uh-huh.
can cause serious friction,
Big time.
especially with people we are closest to.
In those intimate relationships, for sure.
So it can lead to all these misunderstandings.
Yeah.
Like we expect our partners to just get our needs based on tiny little clues.
Right.
And when they don't, we get all frustrated and resentful.
It's like a recipe for disaster.
It really is. So instead of jumping to the conclusion, our partner's ignoring us,
Yeah.
maybe our signals just aren't as strong as we think they are.
That's often the case.
Can you give us an example from the book?
Sure. One example is a partner who expects their significant other to just know they need space
Okay,
after a long day, just based on like a quick comment.
got it.
Or maybe they assume their affection is obvious
Uh-huh.
just from giving occasional compliments
Right.
when their partner actually wants more direct expressions of love.
Makes sense. We might think we're being totally obvious,
Yeah.
but without clear communication, the message can get lost in translation.
Lost in translation big time.
Mm-hmm.
And communicate, don't assume really emphasizes this.
Okay.
How those little miscommunications over and over
Yeah.
can create a vicious cycle in relationships.
Oh, for sure. So one partner's intentions get misinterpreted over and over again.
Exactly.
And it can lead to feeling invalidated and resentful.
Absolutely. And over time, that can erode trust and cause communication breakdowns.
So how do we break free from this cycle?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah, but thankfully, communicate, don't assume doesn't just point out the problem. It actually offers some solutions.
It does. It outlines 4 key strategies to fight this signal amplification bias.
Okay, I'm ready. What's the first one?
The first strategy is to clarify your intentions.
Okay.
Instead of dropping hints or hoping your partner picks up on those subtle cues,
Yeah,
the book stresses being direct.
got it.
Just clearly state your needs and feelings.
No more hinting around.
Exactly.
So instead of sighing dramatically
Ha!
and hoping your partner will magically know you need space,
Yeah.
you actually say, hey, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Would it be all right if I had some time to myself tonight?
Exactly. It's all about being clear and direct.
No room for misinterpretation.
Right. The second strategy the book highlights is active listening.
Okay. Active listening. It sounds simple enough,
It does.
but I bet it takes work to really master it.
You're absolutely right. It's more than just hearing the words. It's about paying attention to tone of voice,
Uh-huh.
body language,
Okay.
and those underlying emotions.
So you're really trying to understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. The book recommends using techniques like reflective listening, like
Yeah.
summarizing what you've heard or asking clarifying questions.
To make sure you really get it.
Yeah, instead of jumping in with your own response, you're
Mm.
taking the time to understand their perspective.
That makes sense. What about the other two strategies?
The third strategy is to establish feedback mechanisms.
Feedback mechanisms.
Yeah, basically creating opportunities to check in with your partner
Okay.
and make sure your message is landing the way you intended.
Like a safety net.
Exactly. It could be as simple as asking, does that make sense?
Yep.
Or how did that come across?
So you're preventing those communication breakdowns before they happen.
Exactly. And the final strategy from communicate, don't assume.
Okay, tell me.
The final strategy is empathy development.
Empathy. That's something we hear a lot about,
Yeah,
but it's easier said than done. Right.
it can be.
So how can we actually cultivate more empathy?
The book really emphasizes putting yourself in your partner's shoes.
Trying to see things from their perspective.
Exactly. Recognizing that they might interpret things differently than you.
Because everyone has their own experiences and viewpoints.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that their reactions
Mm-hmm.
might be coming from their own past experiences, beliefs, and values, which might be totally different from yours.
So it's like stepping outside of your own bubble
Yeah,
and seeing the world through their eyes. All these strategies seem really connected.
definitely.
Like you can't really have effective communication
Right.
without empathy, active listening,
Yeah.
or being willing to clarify what you mean.
They all work together to create a more open and understanding dynamic.
But where does this fit into psychology and sociology?
Ooh, good question.
Are there theories that explain why we fall into the trap of signal amplification bias?
There are. And Communicate, Don't Assume touches on some really interesting ones.
Okay, tell me more.
One of the key psychological theories the book connects to this bias,
Is the theory of mind.
theory of mind. That rings a bell. Can you remind us what that is?
Theory of mind is the ability to understand that other people
Okay.
have their own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs.
So basically, they don't see the world exactly like I do.
Exactly. It's the ability to step outside of our own perspective
Okay.
and consider the mental states of others.
So if we have a strong theory of mind,
Yeah,
we're less likely to assume everyone sees the world the same way we do.
exactly.
Does that mean we're less susceptible to signal amplification bias?
Right. The book suggests that strengthening our theory of mind
Okay.
can be key to becoming more aware of our biases
I see.
and improving our communication overall.
So it's not just about communication skills,
Right.
it's also about our cognitive abilities.
It is.
What are some of the other theories in Communicate, Don't Assume?
Another important theory is attribution theory.
Attribution theory.
Yeah, which explores how we explain other people's behavior.
I remember that from psychology class.
Oh, yeah. It has something to do with how we explain the causes of people's actions, right?
You got it. The book highlights how we often make what are called dispositional attributions,
Okay.
meaning we attribute behavior to a person's personality or character,
Okay.
rather than considering outside factors that might be affecting them.
So, for example, if our partner forgets to pick something up from the store,
Yeah.
we might jump to the conclusion that they're inconsiderate or lazy
Right.
instead of thinking maybe they were just super stressed or distracted.
Exactly. And Communicate, Don't Assume points out
Okay.
that this tendency to jump to those conclusions can really fuel signal amplification bias.
It's like automatically assuming the worst
Yeah,
instead of giving them the benefit of the doubt.
exactly.
That can lead to a lot of unnecessary conflict.
For sure. What about sociological theories?
Yeah, good question.
Does Communicate, Don't Assume connect this bias to any of those?
I don't know, does it?
It does. The book connects it to symbolic interactionism.
Symbolic interactionism.
It's a sociological perspective
Okay.
that focuses on how we create meaning through interacting with others. It emphasizes shared symbols and understanding in communication.
Okay, so how does that tie into signal amplification bias?
Well, if we're always misinterpreting each other's signals, it's like
Yeah.
we're speaking different languages.
Oh, and
The symbols we rely on to communicate,
uh-huh.
they lose their power.
Like trying to read a book in a language you don't understand.
Exactly. You miss all the nuance and meaning.
And when that happens in a relationship,
Yeah.
communicate, don't assume, says it can really weaken the connection.
Like building a house on shaky ground.
Without a shared understanding of those symbols and cues,
Yeah.
the relationship becomes vulnerable to misinterpretations and conflict.
For sure.
Wow, this is all making a lot of sense.
Good.
We've talked about how signal amplification bias can impact our relationships,
Uh-huh.
explored some ways to overcome it. And now we're seeing how it connects to broader psychological and sociological theories.
It's all connected.
But it feels like we're just getting started.
We are.
There's so much more to explore here.
There is. And Communicate, Don't Assume actually goes into other concepts
Oh, okay.
that are closely related to signal amplification bias.
Like what?
One is the illusion of transparency.
The illusion of transparency.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's this tendency to overestimate how much other people can see our internal states.
So we think we're being way more transparent than we actually are.
Exactly.
So we might assume our partner can tell we're upset,
Yeah.
even if we haven't said anything,
Right, which can be a problem.
because we're expecting them to be a mind reader.
Exactly.
It reminds me of that saying, if you're angry, write it down. If you're really angry, burn it.
Uh-huh. Love that.
Sometimes we need to express those feelings directly,
Yeah.
even if we think they're obvious.
Recognizing that illusion of transparency is important.
To become better communicators?
Absolutely. Another concept the book explores is emotional contagion.
Emotional contagion. That sounds interesting.
It is.
I'm guessing it has to do with how our emotions can affect the people around us?
Yes, but it's more than that.
Oh, okay.
The book highlights how misreading emotional signals can be a problem.
Oh, I see.
For example, if you misinterpret your partner's fleeting expression as anger, you might react defensively and create unnecessary conflict.
So it's not just about catching other people's emotions,
Right.
but also about interpreting them correctly.
Exactly.
It's fascinating. It really emphasizes mindfulness.
Of our own emotional reactions.
Yes. What about attachment styles?
Oh, interesting question.
Does the book talk about how those might play a role in signal amplification bias?
It does. It suggests that people with secure attachment styles
Wow.
are more likely to communicate openly and directly.
Which can prevent those misunderstandings.
Exactly. They're more comfortable expressing their needs,
Okay,
and they don't assume their partner should just know what they're thinking.
that makes sense. Securely attached individuals tend to have a more positive view of relationships
Yeah,
and are more comfortable being vulnerable.
absolutely. What about people with other attachment styles?
Well, what about them?
People with anxious or avoidant attachment styles
Uh,
might be more prone to misinterpreting their partner's signals.
Leading to more insecurity and conflict.
Exactly.
So someone with an anxious attachment style
Yeah.
might be hyper aware of small cues and interpret them in a negative way.
Right. Even if that wasn't the intention.
And someone with an avoidant attachment style
Yeah.
might be more likely to dismiss their partner's attempts to connect
Leading to feelings of rejection.
and frustration. So
Yes.
understanding our own attachment style
Yeah.
and how it might affect our communication
Right.
can be really insightful.
Absolutely. It can help us identify our vulnerabilities
Okay.
and work towards healthier and more fulfilling relationships.
Wow, this has already been so insightful. I'm already thinking about how to apply these strategies in my own life.
Me too.
And I can't wait to hear more about the practical examples from Communicate, Don't Assume.
Happy to share those with you. The book has some really helpful scenarios.
Great. Let's dive into those practical applications after the break.
Sounds good. Okay, so let's get into some real world stuff
Okay.
where you can actually use these strategies.
Yeah, give me the examples.
One area where Communicate, Don't Assume really gets into it
Uh-huh.
is expressing love and appreciation.
Yeah, it's easy to think like, oh, my partner knows I love them,
Right.
and then we just coast.
We assume and then it backfires.
Totally. But the book makes a really good point.
Okay, what's that?
Actually taking the time to say it out loud can make a huge difference.
Yeah, just saying the word.
Exactly. Instead of assuming your partner feels appreciated because you always make dinner or something,
Yeah.
you could say something like, it means so much to me that you always do the dishes after I cook.
It's nice.
It makes me feel loved and cared for.
Much better than just doing the chores and hoping they notice.
Right. And Communicate, Don't Assume also has some good advice for dealing with conflict.
Conflict. Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Because, let's face it, disagreements happen in every relationship.
They do.
But how you handle those conflicts can make or break things.
Word.
That's where clarifying your intentions is so important.
Oh, yeah, tell me more about that.
So instead of getting caught up in the heat of the moment,
Uh-huh.
you pause and actually say why you're bringing up the issue.
Instead of just reacting.
Exactly. Like, what would that look like?
Imagine you're arguing about something.
Okay.
Like whose turn it is to do laundry.
That's the worst.
Instead of starting a debate about who did what last time,
Right, right.
you could say, hey, I'm bringing this up because I care about sharing the workload fairly
Okay.
and feeling like we're a team.
Wow, that changes everything.
It does.
It goes from blame and defensiveness
Yeah.
to collaboration and understanding,
It helps both people feel heard and respected.
even when you disagree.
Exactly.
Another time, assumptions can mess us up,
Okay, when?
is when we're planning things together.
Oh, yeah. Planning can be tricky.
So many arguments start with a simple, what do you want to do this weekend?
Ugh, don't remind me.
That's where being specific about what you want and expect
Mhm.
can really help.
Okay, so instead of saying, let's do something fun,
Right.
what would you say?
I could say, hey, I'm really feeling like some live music.
Okay, I like it.
Would you be up for checking out that new jazz club downtown on Friday?
Nice. Or maybe you could say,
Yeah.
I know you love trying new restaurants.
Mm.
How about we check out that Thai place you mentioned?
Being specific really leaves less room for misinterpretation.
Absolutely.
Communicate, don't assume is really hitting home this point.
What's that?
That being intentional with our words can have a huge impact.
A ripple effect.
Yeah, it's like we're fine-tuning our communication instruments
I love that analogy.
so we can play a more harmonious tune together.
It's about being mindful of how we express ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that even those closest to us
Yeah.
can't read our minds.
So as we wrap up these practical applications,
Yeah.
what's the main takeaway for our listeners?
I think the main thing is clear communication.
Okay.
It's the foundation of any good relationship.
Communication is key.
We can't rely on subtle cues or assumptions to get our message across.
We got to say what we mean.
We need to articulate our needs and feelings directly,
Okay.
be active listeners,
Yeah.
and make sure we're both on the same page.
It's about going beyond those mental shortcuts.
Yeah,
And having open and honest conversations.
love it. Now I'm curious, after this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's one final thought-provoking idea from the book
Okay.
that you want to leave our listeners with?
Give us something to think about.
I think the most important thing is to be aware of your own communication patterns.
Interesting. So, like, how do we typically express ourselves?
Exactly. And how do we interpret other people's signals?
It's so easy to just go through life on autopilot.
It is.
But with communication, we need to be present and intentional.
That's when real change happens.
This has been an amazing deep dive.
I agree.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of this bias
Me too.
and how it affects my interactions with others.
It's powerful stuff. And I hope our listener feels empowered
Yeah.
to start applying these strategies.
Even small changes in how we communicate can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
And for anyone who wants to dive deeper into this topic,
Yeah.
check out Communicate, Don't Assume.
Great book.
It's full of great tips and advice.
It is.
It's like hitting the pause button and asking yourself, am I really communicating clearly or just hoping for the best?
Yeah, exactly. And the more you work on those skills, the more natural they become.
I'm curious, what have you learned about your own communication style from all of this?
You know, I used to think I was way more transparent than I actually was. I would get so frustrated when people didn't get what I meant.
Yeah.
But this book, Communicate, Don't Assume, really showed me
What did it show you?
that I wasn't always being as clear as I could be.
That's so relatable.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there. What's one small change you've made?
One small change.
Yeah. And how you communicate, that's helped.
I've started asking for clarification more often.
Instead of just assuming you know what they mean?
Yeah, instead of assuming I understand, I just ask, can you say more about that?
Okay.
Or just so I'm sure I understand, can you rephrase that?
Simple but powerful.
It is. It prevents so much miscommunication.
It's like giving everyone a chance to really connect.
They'll understand each other.
Exactly. This deep dive has been amazing.
It has been.
I feel like I have so many new tools for relationships.
And communication in general.
Yeah. And for everyone listening, if you want to learn more,
Definitely check out the book.
Communicate, Don't Assume.
So much good stuff in there.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Wow, time flies.
Huge thanks to our expert for being here
My pleasure.
and to everyone listening.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us. Remember, clear communication is the key.
To strong and fulfilling relationships.
So go out there and start expressing yourselves authentically and intentionally.
Love it.
Until next time.